Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Tatiane Moraes. I am professor at the Department of Epidemiology at the University of Rio de Janeiro State in Brazil. And we are really happy to start our workshop now, our section. The main goal of this workshop, of this section, is improving our capacity in clinical trial research in low and middle income countries. So it's really important to have our view here today with us. For this section, we are bringing with us five leaders in clinical trials from different regions, senior experts that are with us here from different countries, and they will share their knowledge and experience challenges with us today. So thank you so much for our speakers and for our participants to be here. And our workshop is divided and structured in two parts, in 2 moments. In a first moment, we have short presentations from each speaker that are here, and a 10 minutes presentation. And in a second moment, we'll have breakout rooms. And in this moment, we'll have the opportunity to interact with the speakers and send questions, making questions about your researches and projects. So I would like to start the first moment. And for this moment, I would like to invite Dr. Innocent Clement to start his presentation. Dr. Clement is the founder and CEO of CUGH Health and has been working with different clinical trial researches, mainly in North Africa. Right, Dr. Clement, thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much again for your kind introduction. So really, for an invitation to really share some of my learnings, insights around clinical trials, and also study designs and all that. So as a background, like you said, I am a clinician by training. I'm based in New York. I've had experience really supporting clinical trials. I also set up a clinical a CRO based in actually in Nigeria today that we are actually supporting pharma biotech companies across Africa right now. Again, as a background, I have extensive experience working with the pharma biotech company, helping to set up clinical studies across the world. I've had opportunity to lead specifically two major pharma biotech company. One of I would say the highlight of my career there was also supporting the development of chronic Hep B drugs, which is again, it's they're looking for a functional cure for it. As you all know, chronic hepatitis B today has no functional cure. So I had sites across the globe. I mean, I think right now they have over 100 sites, so I'm no longer involved directly. But prior to now, I supported the design, managing the sites across APAC, Oceania, some sites in Africa and also in Europe today. So again, I'm also an entrepreneur, so I'm happy to share some of the knowledge and learnings there. Um, so a lot of challenges that I've seen based on, what I've learned over the years. I mean, really being in the space, supporting either the biotech company or CROs across different countries. I mean, there's a lot of challenges that comes with regulatory and infrastructure challenges, which is also very, very important to highlight here. And I think sometimes a lot of people also don't really look into some of the complexities. It's not just around regulatory alone. There are also cultural barriers. There are also other nuances that, we don't take into account when we design clinical trials and really begin to thinking about how we can now begin to deploy them across. Um, those regulatory challenges it's very important to address, right? And as well as the infrastructural limitations, and it's also very common with some of those low the LMICs, right? And this leads to a lot of tactical delays as well as ethical complications. The challenges maintaining quality standards throughout the trial has also is also very important. I've seen this across many studies that we've actually set up. And it's important to really highlight those challenges. And first, when you're going to those countries, you need to understand, have a better understanding of what are the regulatory requirements there, who are your key opinion leaders that you need to connect with. And if you identify a site, you want to ensure that the sites also have a very good knowledge of what's happening in terms of the regulatory and do they have the right infrastructure, in terms of storage, data, what have you, and even human resource, right, that can help to conduct this. So, and most often, when people design studies here in the US, they just take them and think you can slap it in the wrist of people and think, oh, this is going to work because it worked here in Mayo Clinic, it worked here in Columbia University Hospital, and all that. So, this is very important to as we continue to look at how we deploy clinical trials. Let's have a very good understanding of some of those challenges and how can we mitigate them? How can we work with the local, regulatory governance as well as the either the sites that we're working with. It could either be hospitals, could either be private hospitals or whatever those are, so that we have a better understanding and ensure that we work alongside, the regulatory body who is managing a lot of the implementation of the studies. Um, this is also critically very important that I've seen across while I was also leading some of those clinical trial initiatives around recruitment and retention, which is very, 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 even recruitment also is not just peculiar with the LMICs, but also even in the US. But mostly when you look at those LMICs, the challenge is also mistrust, right? Because they're not sure, they don't know you. So you have to really take your time to build trust and also to ensure that you carry a lot of people along, create awareness, ensure that you work closely with the PIs or the CROs, the local CROs, to ensure that people understand what's the value you're creating. And then, because a lot of this also arise from, historical exploitation, impacting participants. So a lot of times participants, because of all that, they are now willing and to participate in the study. And if there's a mistrust, obviously, that's a huge challenge. Again, that could lead to jeopardizing the study integrity. So these are some of the things that I've seen. The other one here, as you can see highlighted here, is cultural barriers, right? And it's, it might seem simple and easy, but it's also very, very important people to take that into account as you're looking at conducting studies. This could also really, one, hinder communication and understanding, which could lead to really difficulties in participant engaging and, during client retention, so because you're not just recruiting, you also want to ensure that you're able to retain these individuals across the duration of the study. And so these are some of the things that I've seen as well. The other one is data integrity, which is also very important. And I'm sure a lot of you here will probably touch on this as well. But you want to ensure high quality data, which requires rigorous monitoring where you have, CRAs or you have clinical monitors also going to the sites. But most importantly, you also want to ensure that you set up a proper, data infrastructure where you're able to review data, you're able to track audit changes and all that, but you also need to train people to understand the processes of, monitoring data from the entry, data cleaning, to when you even get to begin to think about, uh, reviewing the study and taking it to the next stage. And again, it depends on the stage of the study. You have the phases of the study and all that. But data integrity is certainly very important because again, the quality data requires rigorous monitoring, comprehensive documentation, in practice, which can also be challenging in resource limited settings. And it's about the training to ensure people understand the global standard and how to conduct studies and how data are entered, data are clean, have access to the data, and all that. Let's see here. Okay. And, we talked about some of those key elements where I talked about the mistrust, right? And the cultural barriers itself, really. So the cultural norms and values may also affect recruitment strategies, it requires a tailored approach. You can't just say, okay, I mean, even within APAC, I usually have sites across, Hong Kong, Thailand, um, uh, South Korea, and some you'd be shocked to see when you go to some of those different countries, even though they're from the same region, there are cultural norms and then there are different values that could also affect your recruitment strategies. So it requires really rather than a one size fit all approach, a tailored approach that respects the local beliefs, the practice of the effective and practice of effective engagement. Workforce development is also very important as you begin to think about recruitment, retention, and setting up clinical trials. Stronger local teams, you need the local teams on ground that certainly have a better understanding, have relationship with the key opinion leaders, have relationship with the hospitals, have relationship with maybe again, stakeholders within the countries or the region, and to ensure that this would allow you to set up a very successful trial that would also allow you to provide ongoing training, capacity building, ensure skilled personnel and the LMICs are also really carried along, and they will continue to create this awareness to support your initiative. This I use this to really highlight some of those contextual realities, right? I mean, there could also be political, cultural, and social factors here. For me here, the reason why this is important is also to use this to understand the local context. It is essential. If you want to really set up successful clinical trials, you need to understand the political, the cultural, social factors significantly influence the feasibility and community engagement in all the opportunities. So it's also important to really, again, going back to rather than doing a one size fit all and say we have a protocol that we're looking to deploy now to sites. You want to ensure that as you're building that protocol from the design perspective, you also have to have what I call conversation with local opinion, key opinion leaders across where you're looking to deploy the study, so that you get a better understanding of this unique situation. And as you're building your protocol, you want to ensure that all that is also taken into account on your informed consents, on any patient-facing materials, and as well as your protocol and study design. So these are some of the key practical strategies that I think would help. I mean, as you continue to set up some of those initiatives, you have to work again. I touched on this a little bit. Co-design, where you engage local communities in the design process, ensure trials meet cultural needs and address specific health concerns, and effectively, people need to trust you. You want to be able to leverage technology. We all know the impact of technology today. But again, you're not just using technology. You want to ensure this technology is really addressing the specific need and ensuring that data that are collected, the management of that data, it helps to really improve efficiency, the accuracy, bridging the gaps in traditional monitoring methods, because it's also very important. That can also help you really to engage and identify members who could easily drop out. So, what we've done with a specific country, we went in there and we realized that a lot of people wouldn't want to come into the study center and what the specific data we want to track. So we had to leverage technology that we send them some wearables where we had to explain the importance of the wearables. We had to create some dashboards. We're able to track improvement, progress, track, AEs, SAEs, and all that across. So technology is certainly very important. Hybrid trials, which is also another key element that I also want to highlight here. You have to combine, traditional innovative methodologies and, enhances flexibility, allowing trials to adapt to local context and resource limitation. Community engagement is also very important. You want to ensure that you're engaged with the community, through active participation. That helps to foster relationship, ultimately boosting recruitment, retention, and overall success of your study. Um, I think So yeah, I think I'm not sure if I'm within the time or I've gone beyond my time, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Maybe this will be discussed in the breakout session. But these are some of the key challenges, highlights over the years that have been involved in, setting up clinical studies, managing them, recruiting PIs, and helping them to identify ways that they can create training and working closely with local partners to ensure the success of all the clinical studies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clements, for this great presentation. And we hope to discuss more during the breakout rooms. So now I would like to invite Dr. Jarir At-Tobari to share his presentation. He is professor at the Department of Pharmacology Therapy at the Faculty of Medicine, Public Health and Nursing in Universitas Gadjah Mada from Indonesia. Thanks so much, Dr. Jarir. Can you,
can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Hey.
Okay, and my slide is okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
So yeah, thank you, and good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this workshop. It's an honor to share insight from Southeast Asia and clinical trials, especially because I'm working mostly in the vaccine development, and I will talk more about the challenge and opportunity on clinical trial on vaccines, specifically in Southeast Asia countries. At the end of the 2023, we held a focus group discussion with clinical trial researchers from 8 countries across the Asia Pacific region through the Asia Pacific Vaccine Research Network platform. This is the network that I formed 3 years ago. And we talk about our real experiences in conducting vaccine clinical trial, the challenges we face, and the opportunities that we can build on, especially in low and middle income countries. Some of the key issues we discussed included the infrastructure, regulatory processes, and human resources. We also emphasizes the importance of partnership and collaboration, as well as data management and sharing of data and expertise across these countries in the region. So from this discussion, we developed this paper to capture those insights and highlight how Asia Pacific Vaccine Research Network can strengthen the vaccine research capacity across our region. And you can download it. This paper is open for everybody. There are across the Asia Pacific that we discuss it. There are several main challenges in the conducting vaccine trial or clinical trials in general. First, this is based on our result of discussion. There are shortage of skill on researchers. Many countries still rely on international partners because local scientists don't yet have enough training or experience in vaccine research. And second, the infrastructure and technology are often limited. Many laboratories, example, are of date or not yet have a good clinical practice or good clinical laboratory practice compliance, and some still depend on testing facilities overseas. And the third, the funding and the government support are not always consistent. Most of vaccine research is project-based with little long-term investment or policy backing, and which makes the sustainability is difficult. And the fourth is collaboration and knowledge sharing are still weak. Especially barrier is in communication and also have limited partnership access to advanced technologies and also the global research opportunities. The fifth Public and professional engagement also need improvement. I think we heard it also from the previous talk. Vaccine hesitancy, especially and limited understanding among the health workers, can also affect the trial participation and outcome. And lastly, there's a lack of the strong monitoring and research priorities, especially for tracking side effect and planning long-term study. So the altogether this challenge show how the important of the stronger collaboration is, and to invest also and build sustainable vaccine research trial and vaccine research system across the Asia Pacific region. So the country who were in participate in this discussion mostly is from Asia Pacific region. And across the region, the main challenges are quite similar, as I mentioned earlier, about limited of infrastructure, the shortage skilled researchers, and also funding or regulatory barriers. But countries like Fiji, Philippines, Vietnam, and Mongolia, they share also similar issue with laboratory capacity and data management system that still fall short of international standards. And meanwhile, Indonesia still continue of the challenge in maintaining of GCP and GCLP compliant centers, and in Laos still struggling with the shortage of experience of human resources. So overall, each country has its own specific gaps, but the underlying challenges are shared across the region. But we also discuss it about the opportunity to conduct clinical trial in our region. Even though there are many challenges, they are seen earlier, there are also big opportunity, and then also we are eager to improve our vaccine trial capacity in Asia Pacific region. The first, we can strengthen the research skill and training by building the local expertise through regular training in clinical research, vaccinology, and vaccine safety monitoring, and especially in the rural areas. And second, we can improve infrastructure and capacity by upgrading laboratories, setting up better data management system, and using digital health tools for data surveillance and also for safety monitoring. The third, there are opportunity to improve funding and policy support so that the research can be more sustained and guided also by evidence-based decision. The fourth, the collaboration and community engagement are very important. We working together and both within countries and across borders that help share the knowledge, resources, and build public trust. And last, about monitoring and surveillance, they have to be strengthened using the big data and also joint planning and help set research priority to make better use of resources and also to prepare the region for future pandemics. And then I just want to look at also the highlight the opportunity. I think I mentioned earlier already, but some countries have a unique opportunity. Example, Fiji, they have opportunity or digital health and data management. Indonesia have a stronger regulation and public awareness. And Laos, there's have a opportunity to integrate research into routine health services. Mongolia and Thailand also emphasize the training and policy maker engagement. They are very strong in that area. And in Vietnam, they have improving now data center to meet the global standards. So, and then as well as I just want to highlight one more thing is about the Southeast Asia country, why this is important as part of the vaccine trial. It's because the vaccine performance sometimes vary depending on local condition, like genetics, age, existing immunity, as well as nutrition, chronic infection, microbiome, and those could influence the response of the vaccine. So that's why these factors are important that we need to conduct the vaccine trial in this region. And then this is my conclusion that across low and middle income countries in Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific, we face similar challenge. limited infrastructure, not enough trained people, and funding problems, but there are also big opportunity to growth. In each country has its own specific needs, but working together through regional networks and partnership will help us to overcome this challenge. Of course, we look ahead to making clinical trial more inclusive around the world. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's also important to make sure healthcare solutions are fair and effective for everyone. Thank you very much for your attention. I think hope this benefit to have discussion later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jari, for your presentation. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite and introduce Dr. José Suassuna. He is professor at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Rio de Janeiro State in Brazil. Welcome, Dr. Suassuna.
Hello.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I am a trained nephrologist. I work in Rio de Janeiro University, and I was trained basically in nephrology in the UK and came back home, and now I run the renal unit at the State University. I'd like to share the experience that I had in setting up from the site point of view, a clinical trial unit in our setup. I was mostly involved in investigator-initiated clinical trials in the past, with some experience in being PI in some of the transplant trials. But eventually, we felt the need to have a more global presence in terms of rare disease clinical trials, let's say about those diseases that affect about 1 in 2,000 people of a defined population. And nephrology is mostly a specialty that deals with almost all of the non-communicable diseases of importance these days, like diabetes, hypertension, cardiac disease, and so forth. So this is just an illustration of the burden of non-communicable diseases and the rising trend of all the major diseases. And if you look at these trends split by country income, you may see that it rises in all parts of the world, but affects mostly nowadays upper middle income countries and lower middle income countries. But countries classifying the low income category have the steeper uprise curve. So it's a major problem that is growing worldwide. This is a mandate from the FDA that sort of changed it. Actually, the first one was in 2022. This is a draft of the new mandate, but it's still available and is being used and being looked at as the directive for including different patient populations, a diverse mandate in all clinical trials. And the idea is that this sort of mandate would lead to broader applicability of the results to a broader spectrum of patients and to allow a better understanding of diseases and the safe and effective use of the drugs that we are testing. And this mandate has actually been echoed in all the other major agencies that supervise and deal with clinical trials, like the European Medicines Agency and the International Council for Harmonization of Pharmaceutics for Human Use. Why do non-communicable disease trials in LMICs matter? First, as you've seen, the high burden and the unmet need of these parts of the world. The global regulatory diverse requirements that have been now implemented, and the capacity to better recruitment, richer phenotypes, and the global global representativeness of the data. Low and middle income countries, although this is highlighting the major countries classified within this category, but clinical trials, active clinical trials, this is data from 2024, are not active in 2/3 of the LMICs. And some countries like India, China, Brazil, South Africa, and Mexico are the ones that have the most trials these days. As you know, there are many clinical trial sponsorship models, and this is, I'm going to mostly focus on industry clinical trials because most of the new drug trials are being promoted by industry. And these are two of the trials that I'm now participating as, and you can see that we have now this requirement to actually distribute these trials across the world. This one trial on IgA nephropathy, and you can see that all different countries in many areas of the world are now required to be participating in the trial. This is another trial on APOL1-mediated kidney disease that include patients from Europe, the upper income countries, but also from countries within the LMIC category. Well, there are many proposed benefits for participation in clinical trials for patients, especially the availability of cutting-edge treatments for diseases, the better standards for monitoring and follow-up, better control for the conditions, improved outcomes independent of the arm. These patients are followed up much more closely, and they have usually better outcomes. And most of the trials after the blind phase, they have an open label and sometimes an extended phase where the patients can still receive the treatment and far ahead of the availability of the investigational products within the home countries. For researchers, there is also benefits in terms of capacity building, clinical research skill development, acquire new science and statistical competence, the culture of multidisciplinary teamwork, and all the scientific stature of the investigators, and better competitiveness for grants and leadership positions. And for institutions, there are also a number of proposed benefits, and especially the increased output, academic output, and better recognitions of these institutions. Running industry-sponsored phase 3 trials nowadays is big business. This is the projected clinical trial market, and you can see that we're still in 2025, but the projections see a major rise in forecast expenditure in clinical trials across the world. But there are many steps, and that's the steps that I will focus my talk right from now on, especially from although I have nowadays positions as national leaders in other clinical trials, I'll approach this problem mostly from the site, the clinical trial site, the institutional site of each university or hospital, and so forth. So there's a general workflow, and it's when the trial gets to your knowledge, it has already pursued a long way in terms of different decisions. The first one is the sponsor decision, go, no go for the trial. And then you have all the things that have been, some of them have been already approached. And I'll just focus on the ones that involve the site workflow. And it's a lot of work. Now, running an industry-sponsored phase 2 trial is very complex and time-consuming. There are lots of jargons and acronyms that you have to become familiar with it. And the first step is the feasibility phase. You have to have your site selected by the clinical research organization that is running the trial. And the first test you are usually approached, then have the feasibility questionnaires, and they have the performance of the site in previous trials, data ability to screen their database, and lots of different interviews and aspects until eventually there is a final site qualification visit. And the outcome of these visits, whether your site will be ready for participate of the trial or not recommended to be in the trial, or even remain on a sort of reserve list if there are need for further site inclusion throughout the trial. The second and longest and most difficult phase from the site point of view, because you're usually in the weaker position, is the negotiation in terms of contracts and budgets. There are many different costs, and the CRO usually contract intermediate step, which is a company that specializes in negotiating the trial. And they are paid by not by whatever the expense. They are paid by how quick and how fast and how expedite they can actually put your site within the trial. So they are usually in a hurry, and you don't have sometimes time to analyze all the lines in terms of the negotiation. They keep pressing you all the time. You have to learn that you have time to actually go through this process, to not to actually have your site participate in the trial, but within reasonable workload and being reasonably paid. Then you have the startup activities. It's a lot of regulatory work. And then there's a site initiation visit that you train on the protocol in the electronic system, safety reporting. Quite a lot of people involved, the PI, the sub-investigators, the clinical coordinator, pharmacy, laboratory. You have to train all these people to actually have the team working on the trial. And then eventually the site receives the supplies like kits, the drugs, manuals, and then the trial starts. And then you have the enrollment phase, the study visits. This has to be recorded on the electronic data system. And it's a challenge because every trial has a different system, and you have to train on every system. You have to be expedite. There is queries that arrive every day, and your team has to be ready to be active in answering those queries and have the trial running in a smooth way. The trial execution itself, there is a lot of, as I said, a lot of quality monitoring, logistics, supplies that don't arrive in time, supplies that have to be replaced. And this is from the workload involving is quite heavy, especially if you have 3, 4, 10 trials running within the same time. Nowadays, I have 8 trials running at the same time. So there are scientific and operational science. As I highlighted, the complex electronic data entry requirements and obligations that differ from one vendor to another. It may provide heterogeneous standards of care. Patients within the trial are seen in a different way than your usual patient workload, and that may actually create some operational challenges within your unit. Long-term follow-up increases attrition as well. Sometimes infrastructure limitations build up in the long term. You may lose members of the teams because they have better work offers. Clinical trials are not well reimbursed, especially
Dr. Suasuna? I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just
it's not-
confirming it's not just you.
Yes.
We can't listen to Dr. Suasuna.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening.
Let's hope it resolves soon. Can he hear us?
I'm not sure if he can. I'll try and send a message, or I'm not sure if you have his direct line, Tatiana.
Yeah, I will talk with Dr. Suasuna.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
The phone rang and I was cut off. Sorry for that. I'm coming to the end. So let me just project.
Yeah, your presentation's not showing.
Everything came out of. Share it again. What about now?
Great.
It is.
We can-
Thank
Okay.
you.
So the message is that despite all these problems, running trials in an LMIC environment usually leads to faster recruitment of patients, higher impact science, but receive substantial less financial support. And I'd like to concentrate the last bits of my presentation within this problem, which I think is the major problems that we are now facing. One of the most under-discussed but critical barriers for LMICs. In general, there are lower per patient payments in our parts of the world. Sometimes they offer less than 50% of the pay that they offer in high-income sites. And they under budget essential tasks such as sub-investigator time, pharmacy support, and so forth. They underfund staff, labs, image, and transport. And assuming that costs are lower within our part of the world, but ignore that public hospitals' workloads and regulatory and logistical burdens are unique and has been highlighted by previous presentations. So that leads to burnout and eventually data quality issues. So also, we are in the weak side of the negotiation, and we have some, which I call cognitive deficits. Sometimes we have limited experience in negotiating the budgets. We don't have few comparable benchmarks. What I did is that I started calling the other sides within the country when I was in the learning curve to see how they were dealing. And so we could actually leverage our negotiation to more experienced researchers within the region. Usually there is little institutional support. Some institutions have offices for sponsored research. We do not have that. And sometimes we fear of losing future trials if we push back, if we push too much on this negotiation. So the consequences of underfunding is that the teams may become understaffed, especially when the trial is long in the long term. The site visits diminish, there are longer intervals within the visits, and that leads to lower reimbursements, and you risk losing members of your team, and investigations get overworked. And as I said, we tend to lose experienced coordinators, and eventually that can cause issues of data quality and delays in monitoring. So the practical solution is not to reject the trials, but to try and create a criminal research framework within your ER site. So first one is to have transparent budget and negotiation strategies. As I said, we got in contact with other sites to learn that. Some institutions have clinical trials office. We do not have that, but that's something that we are trying to implement. Institution policies to prevent under-evaluations, strengthening of the infrastructures and retention, and we are quite experienced in regulatory and ethical planning, and in order to ensure scientific and ethical excellence. So to conclude, phase 3 trials in LMICs are no longer an exotic add-on, but actually is central to drug development. It generates opportunities, but very real ethical, logistical, and regulatory challenges, but may bring major benefits for patients, researchers, and institutions. And many of the challenges are solved with careful design, genuine partnership, and of course, experience from previous trials. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Suasuna, for your presentation. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Sen Kinyanjui for his presentation. I don't know if you can hear me. Can he?
I am here, and I'm
great.
just
Thank you.
trying to share. I just want to share right now. Give me a second as I try to share my slides.
Don't worry. Dr. Sun is professor at the Center for Tropical Medicine and Global Health, University of Oxford. Thank you so much, Dr. Shep, for your time and to be here with us.
Can you see my slide?
Yeah, we can see.
Can you see my slides?
Yeah, we can see your
Mic
slides.
test. Can you see my slides? Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? I believe Dr. Sun is frozen.
Yes, I think we're experiencing technical difficulties.
Yeah. So we can wait a few minutes. Well, Dr. Stan, can you hear me? Oh, great.
And just like clockwork, just I started
Yeah.
sharing. It dropped off.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try again. The challenges of doing clinical trials in the developing countries.
Sure.
Communication and internet connectivity. Let me try
Experiencing
again.
the challenges.
Hello, can you see my slide now?
Not
Let me
yet.
just.
Yeah.
Not yet. Okay, let me try something because I'm using two
If you
screens.
prefer, I can share your presentation here.
Let me try the last time because I have had a few changes to it.
Great.
What are we now?
Yeah, we can see your presentation. Yeah,
Okay.
great.
Okay, let me.
Now.
Right. Thank you, and sorry about that. As you've heard, my name is Sam Kinyanjui. I head training and capacity building at the Camera Welcome Research Program. I'm also a professor, associate professor at the Nuffield Department of Medicine. And thanks a lot to the previous presenters. They have covered quite a lot, and in fact, it's surprisingly similar to the issues that I'll also be raising. But the approach I've taken is to just describe the experience we have had at the Chem Welcome Research Program in Kenya in building sustainable ecosystem for clinical trials in a low and a middle income country. Just quickly about the program, we are located in Kenya. We have our main campus in a place called Kilifi at the coast of Kenya. We have a campus in Nairobi and in Mbale in Eastern Uganda. And then we have presence across Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. And we have about 800 staff, 60 funded, and about 200 projects going on at any time. With regards to trials, we undertake two types of trials. We undertake pragmatic trials, trying to improve the treatment guidelines. As many of you are aware, I'm not a clinician, but I'm aware that many of the guidelines that we are using in low and middle income countries are using parameters or guidelines that emerged from either just expert opinion or from clinical trials that were conducted outside Africa and outside low and middle income countries. And that obviously has implication in the effectiveness, and in some cases have been even shown to exacerbate mortality, morbidity, and mortality. So we have looked at administration of oxygen, transfusion, fluid management, nutrition, rehabilitation, antibiotics, and antimalarials. But we also involved in clinical trials from first in human all the way to phase 3, and we have been part of the malaria vaccine trials, pneumonia, fractional dosing for yellow fever vaccines, Ebola, Shigella, chikungunya, and interestingly, a colleague of ours one of our scientists have developed a dual vaccine for Rift Valley fever that can be used both for humans and animals, and is now in phase 2 or not phase 3 stage of trials. But the thrust of my talk today is really about the way we structure where we are doing clinical trials in LMICs. And I want to use this phrase going beyond trial sites. So there's the very colonial model where sites in Africa or in developing countries are just trial sites. And the basic research is done elsewhere that generates a product or intervention, and then it's brought in often external trials in LMICs. The trial ends and there's minimum activities. And what the LMICs provide largely is technical and operational support without a lot of intellectual input. And the sort of capacity that is built is geared toward successful running of a trial. And if there's no new trial coming up, then there's minimum activity at the site. So we thought about how we'd like to tackle this. And the first thing is that you have to have deliberate vision for developing sustainable capacity. Our vision is for African-led research to solve African and global health problems. And therefore, we set out to create a critical mass of African research leaders, having a long-term horizon, looking at quality and multidisciplinarity, and also considering diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And these are not just tokenistic words. We are very clear that we need to have everybody involved in order to build sustainable capacity. So the first thing is that we have embedded our trials within a wider research portfolio so that we are not just a clinical trial site. We have people working in pathogen biology, vaccines themselves, clinical research, population health, and health systems research. And the second is that we established an integrated research platform. We have cutting-edge labs on the one side, and on the other side, we have a health demographic surveillance system, the largest in Africa, that covers over 300,000 people, and it forms a platform for a lot of our longitudinal studies, but also our social science studies. We have relationships with county hospitals within Kenya and across Kenya, where we perform the clinical trials and also the pragmatic trials and do health systems research. The important thing is that all this data is integrated so that we are able to leverage and synergize from what we are learning from each of the different disciplines. And I just want to illustrate this. When COVID-19 hit Kenya, we were the main institution in driving and in supporting response. We were the first to start testing because we already had labs that were set up. We did a very large proportion of the sequencing in Africa, serial surveillance, modeling vulnerability. But what I wanted to point out is that all that setup then allowed us to be one of the few sites in sub-Saharan Africa, outside South Africa and the North, to perform vaccine trials on the CHAdOx COVID-19 vaccine. And this is just to illustrate the necessity of having all the different research infrastructure and human resource in place to really be ready to respond both to ongoing health challenges, but also emerging health challenges such as the occasional pandemic that happen. The third is that you need to nurture local research leadership. And I want here to emphasize that this is going beyond technical competence. So it's not just training a lab tech and at the end of the clinical trial, they are unemployed. We are looking at people who can define and read research, local research agenda, push for translation, engage with multiple publics, negotiate for equitable partnerships, and importantly, train and mentor the next generation of researchers. And this is just one way of looking at it, but highlighting the key things that you need to consider. For example, if you think about how long it takes to train a person from a master's all the way to PhD, to postdoc, to mid-career, to be a senior researcher with their group, then you're looking at a 15-year horizon. You're looking at strong transition support during that period, commitment of time and resources. And so we have developed a theory of change, and I won't go into details, but we are looking at how we attract the best people into research, how we train them through PhD and masters, how we retain them through early postdocs, fellowships, and career development year. This is a transition year from PhD to postdoc, and it's 1 year, and how you nurture mid-career researchers to become research leaders. And we focus on 4 domains, which is transition support, competence development, technical skills, and operational support, and ultimately aiming to generate a large pool of really well-trained African researchers who will then increase the quality and the scale of African-led research and the data that we require to inform policies and interventions leading to basically improved population health indicators, enhanced system resilience, and also enhanced pandemic preparedness. And just again, some of the output. And the main point of showing this is not to be modest, but to really say it's possible to do it even within low and middle income countries. We have trained over 1,000 people and over 157 PhDs. Many of them are now leading institutions and leading groups within the program itself, and have brought back a very substantive amount of money in terms of grants and scholarships and studentship. And that feeds into the sustainability of the program. This has already been emphasized: community, public, and policy engagement, starting with engaging with the local communities and stakeholders who are participants in a lot of our research. Then also engaging people who are opinion shapers, for example, secondary school students, universities, media, and the public. And finally, the people who will be really key in translating the output of the research that we do. And it's important, again, to emphasize that you are not just aiming to inform, for example, the community. You're aiming to build sustainable and deep, respectful, and mutual understanding between all these publics, sustaining and deepening values and policies. We also use those platforms to also understand and improve and contribute to discourses around ethical aspects of conducting clinical research or any other type of research. For example, how much compensation is enough and how much becomes undue inducement? How do you explain a clinical trial to a person who doesn't understand it very well? How do you translate? So those are all factors that we are looking into. And so we are very much aware of the factors that undermine relationships. So if you look at these 2 pictures, that is one of the buildings in our program. In fact, that's where my office is located. And this is the kind of rural area that we operate in. And you can already see there's cultural differences. Not all the researchers come from this area. There's language differences. We learn and we think in English when it comes to science, but we are talking to people in their local language. There are differences in literacy that also impacts on scientific understanding, economic differential. They're looking at us and these researchers who are well paid, they have driving cars, the institution itself has land cruisers that go around for research, and there's already that power differential. And then access to information. We have one type, access to scientific information. They have access to popular information, and it's very easy, for example, for misunderstanding or misinformation on vaccines to percolate well before the correct scientific information percolates through the same community. The final one I would say is collaboration. And again, this has been mentioned, and I've put 3 collaborations: collaborate within the institution itself, collaborate across departments. Often there's a tendency to look at clinical trials as the purview of the clinical research sector or the clinical research department, and ignore whether it's data science, social scientists, ethics, and all the other aspects. And then collaborate beyond your own institution, because that's the way you are able to synergize and access resources that may not be available in your own institution. But it's very important, especially because in low and middle income countries, you're often collaborating with institutions that are from the global north in more developed areas. And there are challenges that we must be aware of that sometimes crop up if they had not been properly thought about before. Governance structure of your collaboration, budget allocation between the collaborating institutions, authorship, credit, research accountability, intellectual property, how will data be shared or retained, material transfer agreements, facility use agreements, and even exit. So essentially ensuring that right from the word go, those collaborations are properly constituted. Thank you very much.